Hey guys, Kristen here from the Farm Trinity, and I am here to teach you a basic recipe for cold process soap making, and we're going to start with the ingredients and tools needed. Starting here, you're going to have your fats and butters. Go to the link and the recipe will be there for you. Make sure you have designated tools, silicone spatulas, and stainless steel spoons. Make sure that you have stick blenders, preferably plastic, a digital scale, lots of paper towel, a digital thermometer, lye, sodium lactate, buckets and pitchers and containers for your fats and butters and your oils and to mix your soaps in, distilled water, mica powders for coloring. For safety, we're going to have gloves, respirators, safety glasses, and then whatever other things that you want to decorate your soaps with, and we'll bring that into the equation a little bit later. Okay guys, so we're going to start with our oils and butters. The recipe is linked down below. So right now I pre-measured everything to save time, but you want to make sure that you have it in ounces. Make sure that when you put your bucket onto your scale, you tear it out so that it excludes the weight of your bucket. Mix your fats and butters and set them aside. Okay, now we're ready to pour our water. I use red tools for when I mix my lye because I associate red with caution, and you should always exercise a tremendous amount of caution with lye. Lye is caustic. If it gets on your skin or in your eyes, it will burn you, it will blind you. Handle it with caution. Be very careful when you work with lye, and designate specific tools for lye and for the water that you use to mix it with. Okay, so I've got my bowl here. I have my scale set to ounces. Set your bowl onto your scale, tear it out to cancel out the weight, and measure out your water. And go ahead and set this aside. Okay, so when you're working with lye, you always want to have your gloves. These gloves I use for soap making only, so they're designated for handling lye. You always want to have a good pair of safety glasses. These are by Brambleberry, and they have a little sponge around the eye cup to prevent splashing from getting into your eyes. And then you want to have your safety mask, either a respirator or a hospital mask. These are kind of difficult to come by nowadays. So you can use, let me take these off. You can use a handkerchief or a piece of material, just something to cover your mouth and your face so that if when you're pouring the lye and mixing the lye, it splashes up on you, it can protect your mouth and your face. Okay, so here we are, all suited up. Take your cup that's designated for lye only, set it on your scale, tear it out, and measure out your lye very carefully. Okay, now that we have our lye and our water mixed, we're gonna go outside to put the lye into the water. When you mix your lye into your water, it's very important that you mix it in a well-ventilated area. We're gonna mix it outside, and then we'll meet you back here in a minute. Now, I do wanna say, when you mix the lye, be certain to put the lye into the water, never the opposite. If you put the water into the lye, you'll get a caustic volcano that billows and spills out caustic material everywhere. So if there's one thing that you take away from this video, it's that. Always put your lye into your water. Make sure that when you mix your lye, you use your designated lye tool, mix it up real good, stay away from the fumes, as you'll see in just a moment. Stir so that you don't feel any granules on the bottom, and that's it. The hard part's over. I'll see you outside. Here we are outside. We're gonna take our lye, pour it into the water, making sure you stay away from it so that you don't breathe in the fumes. Stir it for just a couple of seconds. And then you're done. Okay, so I took my mask off so that you could hear me better, but leave your protective gear on and immediately take a piece of paper towel and wipe off your spatula till it's completely dry. Set it aside and then wipe the inside of your container. You're gonna go through a lot of paper towel. I usually go through about a roll. Right now during quarantine, it's difficult to find paper towel. And I wish I could tell you that you could use less, but it's important to make sure that you have clean paper towel to wipe your tools and your utensils out every time. Okay guys, today we are working with 3 colors. And what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna bloom our colors into our containers with a little bit of water. White is gonna be my primary color in the soap. So I'm gonna use 3 heaping teaspoons of titanium dioxide. And then I want really subtle light and pastel colors to swirl together. So we're gonna use a tiny bit of purple, a very small bit of this super bright pink. This bright pink is really, really bright. So I use a really small amount of that. And then we're gonna take a small amount of the orange. This is also highly pigmented. So just a tiny bit of that, like so. And I prefer to use Crafter's Choice. These are my favorite mica powders for soap making. You can order them from Bulk Apothecary, brambleberry.com, Wholesale Supplies Plus. It's really easy to find. It's a really good quality. I'm also going to take a tiny bit of titanium dioxide, just a small amount, and add that with each of these because I don't want these to be very fluorescent. I want them to be a nice pastel color. And then you're gonna take a little bit of water, just a small amount of water, and you're gonna just pour a tiny bit in here, a little more in the white because there's more. And then with a clean spatula, starting with your lightest color, this is called blooming, where you just take a little bit of water and mix in your colorant. And the reason that you're gonna do this is if you don't bloom it, the powder does not distribute very well into the soap if it's not bloomed. So it'll be lumpy, it'll be unsmooth. So you just wanna make sure that you mix this into kind of like a paste. And that'll ensure a nice smooth blend when you add your soap material to it. And we're gonna do the same thing to the purple, the pink, and the orange. And then, well, if you wanna come over top of this, you can kind of see what it looks like when you bloom it. Okay, so right now, our lye is already mixed, our colors are bloomed, our fats and our butters are combined. We're gonna pop these into the microwave. The goal is to get your fats and your lye to 125 degrees. I like to soap at 120. So I bring my fat and my lye mixture into my workshop at 125 degrees. At that time, we add sodium lactate to the lye water, and then we combine the lye into the fats and butters. So I'm just gonna take this, pop it into the microwave, make sure that you have a clean tool to stir it and check your temperature. Try not to let your fats get too hot. It takes a little while for them to cool down. So I start with about a minute, and then I do about 30-second intervals after that until I get it to around 125 degrees. Make sure that you have your digital thermometer on hand, and you're gonna be running back and forth checking the temperature of your lye water and your fats. Once they're at 125, we'll meet here back at the workstation. Our lye water is at 125 and our fat is also at 125 degrees. At this point, I'm gonna add 4 teaspoons of sodium lactate directly to the lye water. What sodium lactate does is it helps the bar firm up faster, or the loaf firm up faster, so you can unmold your soap a little bit quicker. Sometimes it can take up to, sometimes a week without sodium lactate. And I like to kind of move with my bars a little faster than that. So it just helps firm everything up. It is optional, you don't have to use it. If you do use it, make sure that you wipe your spoon very clean afterwards and set it aside. You're gonna take your lye water, very slowly and carefully pour it into your fat. Okay, and then give it a little stir just to kind of mix it in. You want to make sure that you take paper towel once again and wipe out your container with your lye pretty much immediately. So now we've got the lye in the fat. Because I'm working with 4 different colors, I want to bring this to a very thin trace. So you're going to take this, you're going to pulsate it. Just a few times. We don't want this to get to a thick trace. We want it to be thin so that we can manipulate our colors. So I'll probably do one quick little more pulsate. And that's it. As you can see, I'm still wearing my gloves. I'm still wearing my glasses. I should be wearing my respirator also at this point. Do as I say, not as I do. I have it off right now so that you can hear me and see me talk. But at this point, we're gonna take this thin trace of liquid soap here, still without any fragrance, and we're gonna start with our white color right here. Remember, we bloomed this already, and then we'll do the darker colors in a second. Here's our fragrance oil pre-measured right here. So you're just gonna take this soap batter and very, very carefully pour it into your container. And then we'll set this aside. And the first thing that I like to do is just take a spatula and give it a nice little stir. Because once you start pulsating it with the stick blender, it's gonna turn into soap and it's gonna start getting thick. Not quickly, but you know, somewhat quickly. And we want this to kind of be a medium to thin trace when we pour it into our mold for this specific soap. So we're gonna swap it out here. And we're gonna pulsate. And moving on to our colors. So I work with 2 stick blenders. The reason that I do that is because for my whites, I don't like to mix in any of the colors. So I've got a separate stick blender that I use for my colors. I'll use the same one for all 3 of these colors, starting with the darkest and going to the lightest. And we're just gonna distribute this soap batter equally into each one of these containers. And all of this is real good, valuable stuff, so don't waste any of it. So take your spatula and scrape this good batter out into each one of these. Okay. And you can set that aside and make sure that you've got your paper towel on hand. I like to kind of just wipe my gloves as I go along so that I'm not spreading soap batter anywhere. So just so you guys know, at this point, this is still caustic. It still can burn you. Fresh soap has a tremendously high pH balance in it, so you still want to take precaution when you mix it and when you work with it. So now we're going to start with the purple. We'll get this pulsated just enough to have it mixed. Perfect. Look at how pretty that is. I love that color. And then now we'll move on to the light orange. It'll be kind of a peach color. There we go, beautiful. And then now we'll move on to the pink. So this is our color combination for this soap. We've got a pretty creamy white, a really light pink, a light peach color, and a really light purple. Now is the time that if you decide that any of these colors are a little bit too dark for your taste, like I kind of think that the purple is a little bit too dark. I wanted to see it more pastel. So right now is a really good time to take your white and mix it with your colors to lighten them up. And then also with darkening. So if you want them to be a little bit darker at this point, you can just bloom some more mica powder together with some water in a separate container and add that pasted formula to this to kind of get the color that you want. But right now, you guys can see like the consistency of this is still pretty thin and workable. So I do that to allow myself a little bit of margin for error in the event that I don't like the way that a color turns out. But you can see that it's already starting to thicken up, especially the white. So at this point, this is when we're gonna add our fragrance oil right here that's already pre-measured, and we're gonna start with the white. I also wanna tell you that you should have on hand your mold, whatever mold it is that you plan to use. So I like these molds right here. They're from Brambleberry, they're my favorite. But really you can use anything. If you don't want to invest in a mold like this, you can take a cake pan and line it with parchment paper. There's all kinds of things that you can do to get creative with your molds, but this is my preferred mold. So we're gonna start with the white as our primary color. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna mix the fragrance oil in at this point, saving some for the other colors. And then take your stick blender that you've designated for the white color only. Start with giving it a little stir. Now you can see that the yellow discolors this a little bit. Now I have worked with this fragrance oil before several times, and I know that this fragrance oil will not permanently discolor this, but some do. So when you're picking fragrance oils and essential oils to make soap with, you want to make sure that you do your research so that we know whether or not it's going to discolor your soap base, if it's going to take it to trace too fast, if it's going to seize your batch, if it's going to rice. So if you read the reviews on your fragrance oils before you purchase them, that'll kind of help guide you into picking out the right fragrance oil to create a nice formula. So now, because I want the first layer to be white, I'm gonna bring this to a really thick trace. I'm gonna swirl these three colors together. So I still want these to be a little bit thin, but the white, I want to kind of lay in the mold separate than the colors. So I'm gonna bring it up to a thick trace, and that's gonna be like a super thick pudding consistency. That's pretty thick, and it's actually becoming hard for me to manipulate the batter. So this one is ready to pour. Okay, so we're just gonna set our stick blender aside, and we're gonna have our spatula here, and we're gonna just pour it straight in here. And it doesn't matter if it's lumpy or clumpy or thick, because we're gonna smooth it out here in just a moment. Let's just get the majority of it in, and then give us a good shake and a nice little bang on your table, and that kind of works out the air bubbles. And then at this point, I like to take a piece of paper towel and wipe the side of the mold so that when I layer my colors, there's no white getting in the way, that it's a nice clean layer. So our colors are still thin enough to manipulate and work with, and the reason for that is because remember, we only brought this to a nice thin trace, and we haven't added any of the fragrance to these yet. As soon as you add the fragrance to these, they'll thicken up. So I work with one at a time. So we're just gonna pour a little bit of fragrance oil into the purple, and I'm gonna stir this in rather than pulse it in, because I don't want it to get too thick. Also, this is the time that you can kind of get creative with adding things like poppy seeds. I like to put poppy seeds in with the purple. And what poppy seeds does is it acts as a natural exfoliant. So when you wash yourself, the poppy seeds actually kind of scrub your skin a little bit. And it looks really pretty in with the purple, don't you think? Okay, so this one is ready to go, and then we'll do the pink one next, and then we'll save the rest of that for the peach color. Just kind of mix this in. Again, I'm not pulsating it at this point because I want these to be somewhat thin this is actually a perfect consistency so that when I mix these three together, it kind of creates a real pretty swirl. And then the last color is this light peach color. And I'm thinking, I'm glad I saved some of this white because I think that I'm gonna add a tiny bit of white to this to kind of dull this peach down a little bit. So I'm just gonna take a nice little scoop out of here, add that in there. And now what we're gonna do you see when I move this, how the white's not moving anymore because it's coming to trace? So this is actually a perfect consistency for this white to be in so that I can layer these colors on top of it. So right now, this is nice. Do you see how it sets right on top of that white? So I'm gonna go ahead and add this in really with no rhyme or reason. I just wanna have those three colors kind of layered on top of each other. You wanna work with your batter quickly at this point because it's starting to firm up a little bit. And then we'll take our peach. Ooh, our peach is getting a little thick, but this is okay. It's a little thicker than the rest of the batter because of the fact that I added that white to it. So this is a nice thick, whoopsie daisy, consistency here. Just drop that on there. Okay. And then we'll kind of bang this. I'm actually going to grab that and put that right back in there. Reach my spoon down and manipulate these three colors together just a little bit. Try not to get down to the white though. You want to keep it to swirl just those three colors. Our batter is getting thick, but it's going to be okay. It's still going to be really pretty, especially when we get our top on. And I kind of want my top on this one to be a little bit chunky. And I'll show you why. It creates almost like a wave texture. So now the remaining of our three colors is pretty thick. So what we're going to do is just kind of glop these on. So right now, this is exactly the texture that I want my soap to be, so that when I kind of clump this onto the top, it forms like little peaks and valleys. So this is what I wanted to achieve with my top. And then what I have here is some red sea salt that I think is super pretty. And then I also have some pink Himalayan sea salt. So I'm just gonna take this pink Himalayan sea salt and just kind of sprinkle it on the top. And all those little valleys and grooves, we'll get a little bit of pink sea salt in. Pink sea salt is lovely in soap, but you don't want to mix it into your batter. It's better as a topper. Salts and sugars can actually have a bad reaction with your batter. So I always like to just kind of use it as a topper rather than mixed in with my recipe. And then just to add a little tiny bit of dark pink, I'll take this red salt. This is red sea salt. Look how pretty that is. It has natural sparkle to it. And just kind of sprinkle this on here. This is a fun time for you guys to get creative. You can do whatever you want with your tops. I have all different variations with my soap tops, but this is exactly what I wanted to achieve with this one. So you can hit stop. Okay guys, so this is Wild Orchid soap. This is a complete bar. I used a different color combination with this bar the last time that we were working together. I used a turquoise, a purple, and a cream. And you see how it has like a real rough top? So that's what I'm trying to achieve with this one. but I just decided with this one, I wanted to use a different color combination for spring. So it's gonna be the same fragrance, the same scent, the same shape, the same top, but with different colors, with a little bit of sea salt and red sea salt. Now, the last thing I'd like to talk to you guys about really quickly is cleaning up your space. And I think that this is super important for you guys to understand this. So if you look at my tools, all of this over here, I left it out on purpose. Usually I'm pretty particular about cleaning it up for the video, but I want you guys to see what your tools are gonna look like when you're done working with them. Now, all of these things right here, I'm gonna suit up with some gloves. This is all pretty thick soap, right? So if you put this down your drain, that gets stuck in your pipes. So it's really, really important to clean all of your tools out. And I'm gonna show you what your tools should look like before you wash them. 99% of all of the soap material should be out of your tools before you wash them in your sink. And unless you have lots of money laying around and you're okay with spending it on a good plumber, but it will turn into soap in your drain if you end up mixing all this down there. It doesn't go down. So it seems like an excessive amount of wiping, but it's really important to save your plumbing system. So it should be that clean, literally just a small amount of residue on it. Make sure that these are unplugged. So do you see this right here, how the soap is thickening up on it? Make sure they're unplugged. One time I accidentally hit the power button when I was cleaning it and I almost got hit with a blade. So unplug your tools when you're working with them. You're gonna need to cram your finger in here and get this out. So the cleanup process takes some time. I always just have my trash can right next to me. You're gonna use a lot of paper towel, probably an entire roll. Clean up all your tools, and once you get them to this condition right here, practically clean, 99% clean, then you can take them to your sink and wash them. Now, the most important thing is to make sure that all of this material that's on your workstation is cleaned up. I'm a professional soaper, so my husband built me this beautiful workshop table that I can use to make my soap at. And he built it specifically for me for my height. If you're not a professional soaper and you just want to become a hobbyist or make this in your kitchen, that's totally fine. But make sure that you clean your station so well, because this soap material is still caustic, as you can see from my cheek. And if you get this mixed in with your food, it'll get you very sick. So whatever station it is that you're working with, whatever tools it is that you're using for your soap making, designated for soap making only. Okay, so I'm gonna clean all my tools up, and tomorrow we will unmold this. Because I used a sodium lactate, this soap will be ready to unmold tomorrow. So I'll do a part 2 to this of me unmolding the soap and cutting it so you guys can see what the final result is. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or comments, put them below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. God bless you guys.